Hello, I'm Fiona Ritchie.
And I'm Nik Kendrew.
We're both part of the Redwell team.
Come with us to reignite your passion for primary care.
Welcome to the I've Seen Some Bluebells Primary Care Pod from Redwell.
The Primary Care Pod from Redwell.
So grab your preferred drink of choice, your trainers, or even your dog lead. Here's what's bubbling up as we dive in search of our pearls for the second time this month. Last month, ahead of the start of Ramadan, we shared our article Ramadan Supporting Patients with Long-Term Conditions as a Pearl. This month, we'd like to share with you our new video bite on the same topic. So stay tuned as we discuss what jumped out at us from our brand new bite, Ramadan Impact on Diabetes and Other Chronic Illnesses.
When we pick topics for our courses, we choose them because they're new or they're tricky or something that those of us working in primary care know we need to know but won't find anywhere else. Myeloma has been a popular topic in our recent cancer and GP update courses because it is tricky. Many of us find it a bit baffling, don't we? Paraproteins, immunoglobulins, electrophoresis, light chains, monoclonal gammopathy. Gosh, it's a whole new language. But it's also tricky because it's hard to spot. Of all cancers, it has the longest interval and largest number of consultations between first presentation and diagnosis. So, to celebrate the launch of the new season of GP Update courses, we wanted to share our pearl on myeloma from last season.
And we start our episode this week with the third pearl of the month, and that is sharing our Ramadan video bite. So last month we talked about our written article, Ramadan Supporting Patients with Long-Term Conditions, and we had a great discussion with Osman and Ali all about that. Now this month we're talking about our new video bite on the same topic. Now to watch the bite you'll need to sign in or sign up to a free Redwell account, and this one took me 11 minutes 40 seconds to watch, and it took Fee exactly the same amount of time to watch. Unless you watched it at double speed, of course. So I'm pleased that we have the same time frame for this kind of thing. So what did this all mean for you, Fee?
Well, I have to say, actually, Nik, I was involved in the creation of this bite when Osman wrote it, and I was there when he filmed it in the studio, which was really exciting and lovely to see. And actually, where I work, I don't have that many patients who follow the Muslim faith, so my involvement in this is quite limited, but I have to say it was quite eye-opening. I was aware of certain things around Ramadan and some of the adjustments you need to make, but actually it was about the planning and the behaviour change that really resonated with me. And I found it really inspiring, actually. And I thought this is a really great time when we can, be helping people to become healthier.
I thought that what we could do here is to build on our discussion from last month. And if you've not heard it yet, then it's well worth going back and having a listen after you finish this episode. So to build on our discussion, Fee and I are going to cover the things that jumped out for us from the bite. And we're also on the lookout for a good take-home point as well. So my first learning point, because we didn't cover it in a lot of detail when we chatted to Osman last month, was the dose adjustments for metformin. Now, this is nice and straightforward, and it's an easy win that sits well in my logical mind when it chooses to function that way. So, as we know, metformin needs to be taken with a meal. So if it's once a day dosing, then it would be taken with the evening meal, iftar. If it's usually taken twice a day, then this would remain the same, with the doses being taken with iftar and suhoor, the morning meal. Most of our patients on metformin immediate release will be on a 3 times a day administration. So what do we need to do when fasting and only having 2 meals a day? Well, they need to take the morning dose with suhoor and then take the lunchtime and the evening doses together with iftar, the evening meal. Now, if they are on slow release, once a day metformin, then this will be taken with iftar. What about a learning point from you, Fee?
Yeah, so as I was saying earlier, it was around the behaviour change opportunity and health promotion. Because what I didn't appreciate is the point that Osman makes is that, vices are traditionally abstained from during Ramadan as well as fasting. So perhaps smoking, any other things that people may come up with. And so consultations around this time could be an opportunity to reinforce for example, smoking cessation or cessation, which other advice has been temporarily on hold, and then maybe taking that forward. But he was also telling me that actually it's a time when communities come together and maybe do sort of good deeds for other people in the community. And it might be a time to really use that as a springboard to take on healthier habits. For example, spending more time outdoors or activity. So that could be something to think about as well. So that could be a take action point, actually, if we're seeing people and we're having these conversations, even if we're planning ahead for Ramadan 2026, it could be a time to talk about health in general and use that as a really good motivation.
Fabulous. Now, my second learning point that jumped out at me is also about diabetes medications, and it's the gliflozins, otherwise known as the SGLT2 inhibitors. Why does that sound a bit like the big reveal at the end of an episode of Scooby-Doo in my head? When they take the mask off, the baddie. It's the gliflozins, otherwise known as the SGLT2 inhibitors. Dun, dun, dun.
It was them all along.
It was, and I would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for those pesky kids. Anyway, these need to be used with caution, but no dose adjustment is needed. They should be taken with iftar. Now, patients should be advised on the gliflozin sick day rules and about hydration and told to increase fluids in non-fasting hours if possible. Now, both my learning points are from a guide that's summarised from the International Diabetes Federation, and the bottom line is that we should seek expert advice if we are uncertain, or if there is significant hypo or hyperglycemia, or if the patient has other complications. Here are your take-home messages from the byte Ramadan, Diabetes and Chronic Diseases. Early assessment and planning is key.
Changes to diet and or medication are likely to be needed.
And beware dehydration or hypoglycemia. Okay, so let's pause for a few moments now, and it's time for the part of the podcast that everybody has often written in and actually said how much they enjoy it, and it really brings a smile to their face. That's lovely to hear, and it's been helping some people get through a difficult day. So thank you for sending in your stories, and please keep sending them in. And you can either email us, and all the contact details are in the show notes, or you can send us a text message as well, and that is in the show notes too. So let's kick off with the one for this month. Hello to everybody at the Red Whale Pod. Thank you for keeping us all updated and entertained. Who doesn't love a best intentions story? It was the end of a busy morning clinic, and I had one last patient to see before a well-earned lunch break. I opened the patient's notes to see why she was attending. The patient had completed an online form stating that she needed some help with her mental health. I read through her notes and familiarised myself with her history. I called the lady in and I asked her to confirm her reason for her appointment. It turned out that she had several appointments booked, and today was in fact for a gynae issue. Now, usually I would make sure my room was stocked with everything that I would need prior to a physical exam. However, thinking this was a mental health review, I was unprepared. I quickly nipped behind the curtain and did a speedy stock check. Speculum, check. Gel, check. Swabs, check. We're good to go. I prepared the couch with the rather sad crumpled end of the roll, which was just enough to cover the couch, and a dignity blanket for the patient. I explained the procedure, asked her to slip behind the curtain and hop onto the couch. Once she was comfortable, I came round to wash my hands and begin the examination. However, after thoroughly cleaning my hands, I realised that I had no more hand towels. My hands were too wet to wipe on my scrubs. Not only would that be a tad unprofessional, I would also be sure to have a big wet patch there as well. And I had no more couch roll because we'd used the end of the roll to get the bed ready. So looking around the room, I saw a black cloth sat on the cupboard near the sink. Perfect! I'm saved. While chatting to the patient, I merrily dried my hands on the cloth. The exam went well. I re-washed my hands and I went to use my newfound cloth, but it had vanished. The penny dropped. The black cloth that I had been previously saturating in water was in fact my patient's leggings. By the time I realised, the patient was already dressed and she was sat back in the chair all ready to discuss my findings. She didn't mention her damp clothing, so slightly sort of still in shock, I didn't mention it either. My patient was grateful for the appointment and she thanked me as she left. Now, after telling my colleagues about the embarrassing event, they encouraged me to write in, and they also proceeded to overstock my room with hand towels. I hope you enjoyed my best intention story. Kind regards from Emma Ansell, ANP. So thank you, Emma. That was brilliant.
Oh, Emma. Oh, gosh. Why is it that why don't things just run out at the same time? You know, why do they? It's always something, isn't it? And I don't know, I feel like this piece of elastic, attached to my back so that you think, I can't get all the way round to the storeroom and then back again in time. Oh, Emma, we've all been there.
I think we've all done something similar.
At least it was leggings. I thought it was going to be something else. I thought it was going to be another garment.
Yes. Every cloud has a silver lining. Just think how much worse it could have been. So that's all good.
And you made a lot of effort to make sure that patient felt comfortable and all of that. So all the good stuff was there.
And beautifully written as well. So thank you for that. And if you have a best intention story, then please send it in via the show notes. There's the email address and also the text message route as well.
So Nik, we've got our new trainee package, which has been really popular, hasn't it? Could you tell us a bit more about it, please?
Yes, so the GP Trainee Essential Support Package. Now, this is exclusively available to GPST MDU members and affiliates. So if you're one of those, then it's free and it's worth £165 and it's designed to build your knowledge and confidence and help you pass your exams. And so what's included, I hear you ask? Well, it's really helpful because it's got Red Whale Knowledge Access, which is over 900 written resources to support you during consultations and also with your CPD. And also the top AKT Topics Digital Handbook, which covers areas that trainees struggle with most, and webinars throughout the training year to support you with your exam preparation. So if you click on the link, then you can sign up for that.
And perhaps if you're not a trainee, but you know a trainee, then you might be able to recommend it to them.
Yeah.
So just for the terms and conditions, the package is completely free for MDU affiliate and GPST members, but MDU GPST membership itself does carry a charge to sign up. Our GP Trainee Essentials package is a free benefit of affiliate and GPST MDU membership.
And now it's time for the fourth pearl of the month and spotting myeloma. Let's make it less tricky. Now, many of us find myeloma a bit baffling, and with all the terminology, it can feel like a whole new language. It's also tricky because it's hard to spot. Of all the cancers, it has the longest interval and largest number of consultations between first presentation and diagnosis.
I don't know about you, but I remember from university, the pepper pot skull x-ray in exams. It was always one of those things that would come up and you would just know it. And obviously it was a sign of multiple lytic lesions from myeloma, but we want to catch it a lot earlier than that, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
So Nik, just remind us, let's go back to basics, what myeloma is, please.
Yeah, so if, like us, you need a reminder on this, then here we go. Myeloma is a cancer of plasma cells, white blood cells that produce antibodies known as immunoglobulins. When large numbers of cancerous plasma cells are produced, they overtake the bone marrow and affect the production of all other cell lines, resulting in anemia, leukopenia, and thrombocytopenia. Hence, people presenting with fatigue and breathlessness. The abnormal plasma cells may produce large amounts of abnormal immunoglobulin, which is functionally impaired and inhibits production of normal immunoglobulin. The risk of infection may therefore also be increased. This abnormal immunoglobulin is known as paraprotein. The cancerous plasma cells also have painful effects on the bones. They stimulate osteoclast activity, leading to bone inflammation, lytic lesions, and eventually pathological fractures. People can experience bone pain, particularly in the back and the ribs, and this is one of the most common presentations. This also causes raised calcium levels in the blood. Myeloma also frequently affects kidney function. Paraproteins and light chains clog up the kidneys, leading to reduced renal function and even kidney failure. When light chains pass through the kidney, they can be found in the urine as Bence-Jones proteinuria. This was previously the gold standard test for light chain myeloma. This has now been replaced by serum-free light chain assay, which is a more sensitive test. We're going to chat about this a little more later on. Myeloma is the third commonest hematological malignancy after leukemia and lymphoma, but is still relatively rare. Most clinicians will diagnose only a handful of cases in their career. Early diagnosis significantly improves survival. Advances in treatment improve median survival from 30 months before 2000 to 126 months between 2007 and 2016. That's more than 10 years. And that's from the JAMA in 2022. So it's rare. Fee, have you ever diagnosed it?
Well, yes, actually. When I was a trainee, I had a sort of 60-ish-year-old man who came in with a bit of low back pain and feeling a bit fatigued, and he'd put it down to a bit more gardening recently, actually. And he'd had initial bloods, which were fine. But it's funny because I look back now, I'd just been on a Redwell cancer course back then. And so I followed the guidance at the time of testing. And I remember back then it was a little paper A5 booklet. And so I did things like his Bence-Jones protein. It's a bit of a mouthful, that, isn't it? And his PSA and other bits. And I felt a bit superfluous and a bit like my trainer was going to say, why are you doing all these bloods? Why are you doing all these tests? But lo and behold, he had myeloma. And I wonder now having read this article and knowing a bit more about it, how long it would have taken to reach that diagnosis, because we know it's got that longest interval between first presentation of symptoms and getting the diagnosis.
Yeah, that's right. Isn't it a third take more than 12 months to diagnose?
Yeah, that's right. And they have the greatest number of primary care consults before that diagnosis.
So why the delay?
Well, it's partly because more than 70% of cases of myeloma occur in over 65-year-olds. And of course, it presents with relatively vague symptoms, just like I was saying about my chap. And the things that we see really commonly in primary care, so things like back pain, fatigue, breathlessness. I don't know about you, but that's actually a lot of my consultations.
Yeah.
And then even in combination, these symptoms have a positive predictive value for myeloma of less than 1%. So not that 3% threshold that we work to when we're suspecting cancer. And then that therefore contributes to delay, because you might be thinking it's something else, think it's kind of mechanical back pain, send them off to the physio, or think it's another reason for their breathlessness. And that delay is both before and after presenting to primary care, with a third of myelomas actually being diagnosed as emergency cases, which is definitely something we want to avoid.
Absolutely. So what does this mean for us in practice?
So we think this means that we need a high degree of suspicion, which is why we're obviously discussing it, and we need to work out the appropriate tests to do to increase our chances of earlier detection. And the solution, is combining symptoms with blood results, because that can significantly improve that pickup rate if we get the right combinations. And there's a really useful table in the article, which comes from a case control study, which used data from the government's Clinical Practice Research Data Link, which is also known as the CPRD, and that was published in the BJGP in 2015. And what you can see is how different test and symptom combinations help with that positive predictive value of having myeloma. For example, hypercalcemia and rib pain, or a second episode of back pain, takes that PPV to over 10%, which is a much more helpful threshold.
Yeah, that's really useful to know. Thanks. So shall we think about the test then?
Yep, okay. So we've mentioned that cancerous plasma cells take over the other cell lines and that they also affect osteoclasts. So testing full blood count, ESR or plasma viscosity, and calcium makes sense, doesn't it? So those three. But where do light chains fit in?
Okay, so would you mind reminding us what light chains are, perhaps?
Yes, yeah. So, when we teach this, we find that many of us find light chains a bit bewildering.
And you can include me amongst those who are bewildered.
So, cancerous plasma cells, or myeloma cells, produce lots of a particular immunoglobulin, usually IgG, IgA, or IgM. And just to note that IgD and E are very rare, but if they are found, they are always significant. And the immunoglobulins produced are all exactly the same. They are clones of the original cancerous plasma cell, hence the term monoclonal gammopathy. And it can be picked up on electrophoresis as a monoclonal band. Now, immunoglobulins are composed of heavy chains and light chains, and 15% of myelomas only produce one of the light chains, and that's why we test for light chains. The light chains are called cuppa and lambda, and a myeloma that produces lots of one of the light chains shows up as a skewed ratio of kappa to lambda on a serum-free light chain assay, which you may have seen on lab reports.
And you just shattered I just thought light chains meant they were brighter. That's ruined everything. So anyway, there's a lovely visual impression. Anyway, so what about Bence-Jones proteins, which is what we've traditionally used?
Yeah, good question. So historically, we used to check for light chains by looking for Bence-Jones proteins, which is another name for light chains, in the urine. But now NICE guidance recommends that we use serum-free light chain assay instead if this is available in your area. So that could be an action point to find out. But if not, then you can continue to use Bence-Jones protein for now.
If we look at what NICE say we should be doing regarding blood tests, then this has recently been updated, this year in fact, or in 2025 if you're listening from the future. So keep your eyes peeled on the written pearl, which is in the process of being updated, and indeed the associated article on Red Whale Knowledge. Now, in a move to simplify things, NICE are now saying that instead of doing first line and second line blood tests, then for people aged 60 years and over with persistent bone pain, particularly back pain, or an unexplained fracture, then we should offer, and that's NICE speak for do, so we should offer full blood count, serum calcium, and ESR or plasma viscosity, paraprotein using serum protein electrophoresis, and serum-free light chains, or if serum-free light chain testing is unavailable, then Bence-Jones protein testing in urine. For people aged under 60 years, then NICE say that we should consider the blood tests I've just mentioned. And that's from NICE NG12 from 2015, updated in 2025.
Of course, we also want to be thinking holistically about other causes too. So, for example, do we need to do other tests, things like PSAs? We might want to think about other cancer markers. And do have a look at our article on NICE suspected cancer guidelines on Red Whale Knowledge for more.
And then how do we interpret these results?
Good question. So, Myeloma UK have a really handy tool which you can access in the links at the bottom of the article, and we'll also put a link in the show notes. We've summarised that tool into a clear table in our article, and you might want to go back and look at that so it's really clear. What we need to know firstly is if there is any abnormal paraprotein or abnormal light chain ratio plus symptoms suggesting an urgent problem, for example, spinal cord compression or AKI. If any of those are found, then that person needs immediate referral to haematology or another pathway if dictated by presentation, for example, spinal cord compression. Then, if there are any moderate levels of IgG, A or IgM paraprotein or an abnormal light chain ratio of less than 0.1 or greater than 7 or Bence-Jones proteinuria, or, as I said earlier, any finding of IgD or IgE paraprotein, because remember, if found they are always significant, then we should refer to the suspected cancer pathway.
And are there any rule-out tests?
We should be aware that no single blood test can rule out myeloma.
Okay, and what about CRP?
Yeah, so we shouldn't be reassured by a normal CRP, because CRP is often normal in people with myeloma, with no difference between cases and controls in this study.
And then what about calcium? What about if that's normal?
Yeah, so again, don't be reassured by a normal serum calcium or creatinine. And that's because these rise much later in the disease. So if it's normal, it doesn't rule out myeloma.
Okay.
Now let's just move on to think about the spectrum of disease in myeloma. So Nick, can you tell us where MGUS and smouldering myeloma fits into all of this, please?
Well, I'll try. So these two conditions are precursors of myeloma, and they fall on a spectrum along the way to active myeloma. Now, both have the potential to become myeloma and are likely to require monitoring. 3 to 5% of people over 65 and 10% of those over 80 have monoclonal gammopathy of undetermined significance, known as MGUS. An estimated 1% each year progress to multiple myeloma or other lymphoproliferative disease, and most will never develop myeloma, and that's from JAMA in 2022. These people are picked up while asymptomatic, perhaps through blood tests for other conditions. They don't have symptoms of myeloma or any end organ damage. They may have a mildly raised paraprotein level or a mildly abnormal light chain ratio, not reaching the threshold for a suspected cancer referral. Smouldering myeloma is the presence of significant paraprotein but with no evidence of end organ damage. It's an intermediate stage between MGUS and myeloma. 10% of people with smouldering myeloma will progress to myeloma each year. NICE recommends 3 monthly monitoring for the first 5 years after diagnosis, and then a personalised plan based on individual risk factors for progression, which will be supplied by secondary care. Monitoring should include assessment of symptoms, bloods, and asking patients to report any new bone symptoms. This should then trigger imaging to be requested.
Thanks for that, Nick, and hopefully that's a lot clearer now for many of us. And a take action point might be to share your learning here with colleagues and think about how you might support these patients in your practice. So, some take home messages, Nick?
Yes, so here we go. Myeloma is rare and easily missed. Consider it in those 60 years and over with bone pain and back pain, fatigue, breathlessness and weight loss. In 2025, NICE have simplified their guidance, and they now say that for people aged 60 years and over with persistent bone pain, particularly back pain or unexplained fracture, then
we need to think about myeloma and check full blood count, calcium, ESR and test for paraproteins.
NICE say that we should offer those tests to people aged 60 and over with those symptoms, and we should consider those tests for people aged under 60 years with those symptoms. And finally, be aware of smouldering myeloma and MGUS. We might be asked to follow up. Now, if you're hankering after a Red Whale Knowledge subscription, then we're offering a 10% discount on Red Whale Knowledge for our fabulous Red Whale pod members. And how do you become a member, I hear you ask? Well, if you're listening to us, then you're part of our pod and there's no escape. So welcome aboard. Now, all you have to do is go to redwhale.co.uk. You put Red Whale Knowledge in your basket. Don't sneak anything else in, and you enter the code RedWellPod to get 10% off. And here's a small print. The discount is only for this product, so don't try it on anything else. And please also note that this voucher is all one word and all lowercase, RedWellPod.
If you've enjoyed listening, then please give us a 5-star rating on whichever platform you use. It only takes a few seconds, and we'd really appreciate it. And if you can spare a little more time, then please give us a nice review too. Because of the way the algorithms work, it means that other people just like you can discover us.
And of course, putting algorithms aside, there is no greater recommendation than a word of mouth recommendation. So if you've got value from listening to the podcast today, then please don't keep it a secret. Please tell everybody that you know who might also benefit from listening. All the resources that you need are in the show notes, and all the links are in the show description on your preferred podcasting platform.
And you can also find us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn and X. If you want to see something about the podcast, then please use the hashtag RedWellPod.
And the other thing you can do if you click on the link in the bio is to leave us a voice message telling us about anything that you found helpful or would like us to go over.
You can also email us. Our address is podcast@red-whale.co.uk. Until next time, I'm Fiona Ritchie.
And I'm Nick Kendrew.
Remember to keep Red Whale Knowledge open on your desktop at work, so we're with you when you need that bit of extra information or reassurance.
Take care and look after yourself. Bye-bye.
Bye.